All right, let's dive right in. Today, we are digging into an analysis that suggests something pretty fundamental is changing in the relationship between the US government and private businesses. We're going to explore a trend that seems to be blurring the lines and, honestly, raising some really serious questions about the future of American capitalism. So let's just put the main question right out there, because this is what our whole explainer is about. Is the US government shifting its role from being the referee, the one who just sets the rules of the game, to actually becoming a player on the field, or maybe even an owner of the team? To really get a handle on what's going on, the source material we're looking at frames this whole thing like a medical diagnosis. So we're going to examine the symptoms, talk about the side effects, and even look at a potential prescription for what it's calling an ailment in America's core economic identity.
Now, let's be super clear about something right off the bat. The analysis we're digging into is not saying the US has turned into some classic authoritarian state. That's not the argument being made here at all.
But, and this is really the heart of the diagnosis, it argues that the American business world is showing some pretty significant, pretty concerning signs of something economists call state capitalism. So, what exactly is that? Well, to put it simply, state capitalism is what happens when the government stops just regulating and starts getting directly involved in for-profit businesses. We're talking about the state actively participating, sometimes to the point of owning and managing companies itself. And look, this isn't just some abstract idea. The analysis points to some hard data. If you look at the Economic Freedom Index, the U.S. score has dropped to 70. That is its lowest point since 2004. After averaging around 77 for years, this drop officially moves the U.S. from the free category down to mostly free. That's a big deal. So if state capitalism is the diagnosis, what are the symptoms? How is this government intervention actually showing up day to day for private companies? Let's break down the evidence that's presented. Okay, a major symptom, according to this analysis, is the government taking direct ownership stakes in private companies. For example, the federal government now holds a 10% stake in Intel, which actually makes it the company's largest shareholder. And it's not just tech. The Department of Defense bought 15% of MP Materials, a key mining company. The critical thing here is this isn't the government just buying products. This is direct ownership. Next up, this idea of revenue sharing. To get licenses to export their products to China, huge chip companies like NVIDIA and AMD have reportedly agreed to give the government 15% of their revenue from those sales. This is a practice that critics have called, and this is a strong word, extortion, and something they say is totally unprecedented in American business. And then you have the rise of what are called golden shares. As part of the big deal for Nippon Steel to buy U.S. Steel, the government apparently got one of these. So what is it? It's a special share that gives certain government officials personal veto power over huge company decisions. It's a direct line of control right into the boardroom. And the final symptom they highlight is a big one: expanded corporate surveillance. Intelligence agencies are now able to bypass the traditional warrant process by just buying massive troves of corporate data directly. Meanwhile, agencies like the FBI and DHS are hiring private firms to monitor business and social media activity. The source material calls this a powerful partnership between government surveillance and corporate data. When you put all these symptoms together, it's led to some really stark comparisons. The Wall Street Journal put it this way, and I'm quoting here. They said, this approach is imitating the Chinese Communist Party by extending political control ever deeper into the economy. That's a pretty heavy statement, and it really shows you how serious these concerns are. So, we've gone through the diagnosis and the symptoms laid out in the analysis. Now for the big question: what are the actual consequences? What are the economic side effects of all this for businesses and for the economy as a whole?
Let's start with a number: $1.8 trillion. According to the Chamber of Commerce, that's the estimated price tag of recent regulations on American businesses. And this isn't just some abstract figure. The source claims this is a huge financial weight that ends up impacting everything from prices and wages to whether a company can invest in its future.
And that massive cost is said to create immediate headaches. You've got businesses dealing with crazy compliance costs, which makes them think twice about making big, long-term investments. There's even talk of a potential brain drain, where top talent leaves for places with more predictable rules. But the analysis argues the long-term worries are even more serious. Things like the erosion of the rule of law, markets that aren't truly free, and less accountability when politics, not business sense, drives economic decisions. Okay, so given this really tricky environment, what's the prescription? How are businesses and their leaders supposed to adapt to a reality that feels so new and unpredictable? The analysis lays out a pretty clear three-part strategy.
The recommended game plan starts with getting way better at political risk management. Basically, you have to plan for a future where the government might get even more involved. Next, it says you have to strengthen relationships with all your stakeholders, because you need to be able to navigate a world where politics can directly hit your bottom line. And finally, the advice is to build up your operational resilience. Diversify where your money comes from and make sure your legal compliance is absolutely bulletproof. So, after looking at the diagnosis, all the symptoms, and the proposed prescription, we're left at a really fundamental point. This isn't just about corporate strategy anymore. It's about the very nature of the American economy. It really does feel like we're at a crossroads. And that brings us to the final thought that this whole analysis leaves us with. As these lines between government power and corporate power just keep getting blurrier, and as that referee keeps stepping further and further onto the field to play the game, the ultimate question is this: what does the future hold for American economic freedom?